Hey everyone, welcome back to the next Deconstructed video. I've been wanting to do one of these again for quite a long time, but it's always been kicked down the priority list. I'm going to try and bump it up the priority list now, because this is obviously something that people find quite helpful to actually learn and explore the projects that I'm releasing. As you can see, I'm in a new space, a lot nicer. In some ways, a lot more greenery. I'm very happy about that. And you can also see that I'm sitting on the couch at the moment just with my laptop. That's partly because we've got this view here, but to be honest, it's actually authentic to how I make the music these days. So I've spent a lot of time over the last few years trying to get my workflow entirely onto a laptop, and that means that it's actually enabled me to work off like from my sofa, from my couch. Okay, let's jump into the track and take a listen. So this is DigiChip Duel. Yeah, so that is basically the loop of DigiChip Duel, and for the full track it's pretty much loops twice, which I do in a lot of my recent tracks. So it's kind of nice and focused, not a huge amount of instruments. Every instrument is, created by me either from scratch or using, in this case, mech sounds, which I have created from scratch and then sampled and remixed and stuff like that. So. Alright, where do we start? Why don't we just start at the top, and I'll mute some of those export files. First thing, you might notice that I'm using a different DAW to my previous videos. So I'm using Ardour at the moment, Ardour, however you say it. I've avoided using it for a while for a few reasons that, let's just say, I was rubbed the wrong way early on. But ultimately, it is actually probably the most fully featured DAW on Linux at the moment. And once you learn how to use it, it is very, very good. It is also, if we're not just looking at the open source space, compare it to commercial options, it's actually one of the cheapest and greatest value for money options out there. So Ardour is actually excellent in that space. I will probably make another video another time explaining why I avoided using it for so long and some of my gripes, and whether I still believe those gripes or not, that's to be seen. But I have been using it for the last few tracks, and it has really enabled me to just do a more fully featured professional workflow again. So anyway, jumping into the track itself, let's just start with nodes, the first instrument here. So what you'll see is I'm using a plugin here, when it wants to open, called AmiSampler. So this is a sampler plugin that is inspired, I believe, by the Amiga. It would make sense from the name. As with everything I'm showing, open source, all the plugins here are free to use. And I'm just using samples that are from my Mech Sounds pack, so you can download them yourself. So this instrument just has one of the tonal ones, emot sign, or emotional sign. So if we just play this instrument, So you can see that's that piano roll MIDI is looping there. This is one of the reasons I'm enjoying Ardour at the moment as opposed to trackers that I've been using a lot, is that it is a lot quicker to do chords and multi-key instruments for something that's less single voice sounding. But this AmiSampler, as I said, is pretty much just a robust sampler. If you throw in a stereo file, it'll pretty much turn it to mono, and it does put a little bit of kind of bit crushing on it, I think, just for the kind of old Amiga aesthetic. But you've actually got this sample and hold function here. Which hopefully you could hear that. It means you can actually adjust how much it is bit crushed. So with this particular sampler, it's never going to be nothing. But to be honest, the little bit that it puts on when that slider's up fully unbit crushed, let's say, it actually adds a little bit of shimmer I really like personally. So plus you've got loop functions and this cool function called pooler, which basically when you've got that on, you set the channel 1 width or the channel width for that sample, and where you set it to is where it will be in the panning for the first hit, and then with pooler on, the next hit will be the opposite side, and so it kind of then ping pongs, and that's really good for getting kind of stereo width for any single instrument. Now you can see it's just got number 1 tonal emotional sign, emot sign. But if we look at a different instrument, for example, if I scroll down, so Vox echoes, for example, that sounds like this. So we've got 2 different layers there, and you can change the volume, you can change the pooler, the width, you can change the sample and hold differently for each of them. You've also got some kind of global settings. You've got the vibrato speed and vibrato amount, plus some inbuilt filters for taking off some of the harshness that you'll get. If you go to more settings, there's some more settings here as well, but so far I haven't used those. The MIDI section here, if you change that bass key, so it's currently C3 by default, or C4 by default usually, I think, that basically lets you change what the root key is of the sample. So if you're ingesting a sample that is not actually C, if it's D, for example, you change that bass key to D3 or D4, and that just keeps it in tune with the other samples that you have there. So if we listen to that again, so you can hear that there's some ping pong delay happening there. Whoops, ping pong delay happening there. Come on, AmiSampler. That's not happening within AmiSampler. That's actually happening within Cardinal FX. Now, I think I've talked about Cardinal on the channel here, but if you haven't seen it, there's a fantastic plugin called VCV Rack. Now, that's its own standalone program, and it's a modular synth ecosystem, but virtually. Now, there is you can pay for a plugin version of VCV Rack, but someone has also forked and created a free plugin version called Cardinal, and so that's by Distro here, Distro. Now the good thing about Cardinal is good and bad. With VCV Rack, you can download any modules you want, and it's very easy to manage. Cardinal comes pre-equipped with a whole lot of modules, but you can't add any to it. Now the bad thing is that you can't add any to it. So it means you can't add really obscure ones that aren't usually used. The good thing though is because there is a really robust set of models already with it, and there's a lot, there's many that come with it. It means anyone can download Cardinal and straight away open your projects and already have the modules needed. So I don't think I've encountered very many cases at all where the modules within Cardinal haven't been enough to do what I need. I'm pretty sure I've even gone as far as doing no input mixing with feedback loops and stuff like that in Cardinal. So VCV and the people working on that, fantastic work, amazing what you're doing, and everyone contributing modules. Awesome work with Cardinal, makes it very accessible as a plugin. So as I said, that's basically just being used as a ping pong delay here. I'm just using the Surge XT delay module in Cardinal, and that's just beat synced here. Let's take a look at some other sounds here. So this guitar sound, not a guitar. Again, everything samples here. This is using 3 layers, LED or electric lead 2, LED 1, electric lead 1, distorted keys. If memory serves me correctly, these 3 were actually synthesized in Vital or Vitalium, which is the Linux fork of Vital that I use. And I believe 1 or 2 of them were actually used in the Thunderbolt Lab track. When we look at that track, we'll be able to see for sure. So I ended up, taking out all the sounds from that and packaging them into samples so you could download them in Mech Sounds sample pack. So not a whole lot to say there. I haven't done it on these. On some I'll do loop, and then you can choose the start and end loop points. So for example, if we try that, you might be able to hear the difference there. We'll just take that off. Again, that's just using a ping pong delay. I've got slightly different timings on the different ping pong delays. Something of note here is that you can see that I actually have this muted and I've got the audio exported here. Due to the sound and the way the delay was working, I was starting to get this resonance at a certain frequency, which was really hard to remove without removing the character of the delay itself. And so what I did was basically export just that little bit and then fade out the end of the sample and get the timing right, automate the volume a bit to remove that resonance where it wasn't needed, essentially, so I could keep the character of the synth going and remove the resonance where it wasn't needed anymore. So now if we look at some of the drums here, we've got a kick. That's just an old electric kick sample I had made. Not a whole lot going on there. Originally I wasn't thinking of doing I don't usually like doing just a straight 4 to the floor kick kind of beat. But it kind of worked for this. So for example, if we bring in the hats as well, and then what we're calling the snare, so I mean the hats again, just one of the hats that I had, and you can see we're doing the puller thing, so it bounces around a bit more width. And then if we just do the snare, if we look at what's being played, we've got a few snares layered there. The top one is the loudest, the others are a bit quieter. I've got different sample on hold, kind of bit crushing sound on different ones. And I was adjusting those levels of volume in that to kind of define its character. Now you can see the different colors here are different velocities. So for example, this first beat is a velocity of 64, and then it goes down to 30, and then 15, just to get those kind of roll-offs. So it's not like a real solid hitting snare, but it has a bit of character. Sounds kind of similar to the hats, but a little bit different to give it a bit more variation. Yeah, and so like with a lot of the music I'm getting into making recently, things in isolation won't necessarily sound the greatest, but it's really about getting that kind of the recipe right. Or I often think in terms of groove these days. So you kind of add ingredients, change the timing, get something a little bit more danceable, even though this is kind of retro game music. I find kind of danceable, catchy retro game music is actually often the most memorable, and I have some of the fondest memories with. So that's what the recipe and the cooking and everything ends up becoming. One thing you can hear here is at the end of one of the bars. So these plucks. Again, no, so we're on the wrong one here. Let's go plucks. So we've got a couple sounds here. We've got a sawmoth and harsh pluck. And then what I've got here is a loop that's happening. It's not usually reaching that loop point in the note length, but it just kind of keeps it going if it needs to. We've got some pooler, so it's bouncing around, and then we've got a lot of the ping pong delay happening here as well. Now once I added this, first of all, I think it added a bit more interest every kind of bar or every 4 bars, and kept things feeling like they're moving. But I think between that and some of the other kind of lead and harmony synth sounds I've got, it actually started reminding me of some of the battle music from Pokemon Colosseum, which is a GameCube game that I grew up playing. So it's kind of got not quite the PS1 and not quite the Game Boy Advance feel, but maybe that next generation. So your kind of GameCube, PS2 kind of era sound. Probably the only other big thing of note here is the key change that happens and brings in that kind of other main lead. So it's kind of going around for a while. So there's guitars echoing out, then build up to the key change. And that final bit leads back into the key change, back to our original key. And it is like a lot of my tracks, simply moves down, I believe it's 4 semitones, 2 or 4 semitones. Pretty much all the tonal instruments just go down. So it's not anything too complex, but that kind of key change where it is just shifting everything down kind of gives it the sound of the video game era that I love, which is the late 90s, early 2000s. Partly because I think a lot of the producers around that time were using samplers and often had kind of the chords baked in as a sample, and so it was they couldn't change the individual notes of the chord. They had to just move the entire chord, transpose it up or down. So that's why you get a lot of those kind of key changes where the whole thing just shifts down. Originally I had shifted down the percussion as well, but that started sounding quite bad, so I just left the percussion, moved it back up to its original place. But yeah, so I think that pretty much covers it. You've seen all the main plugins and things that I've done here. I think I just managed to get things in the right spot, and I'm really happy with how this one turned out, and look forward to creating more in this style. So as I said, as always, you can go to my website, go to DigiChip Duel, find it through the homepage or through albums, download the WAV file, download the project. You can explore everything I've got here. All the plugins used are completely free. Make sure to download mech sounds as well. I don't think you need it to open this project, because AmiSampler seems to store the samples within the project save state, which is great. But if you like any of the specific sounds, download mech sounds, and you can explore use the samples themselves or explore the project files of how I made those sounds. So, if you have any other questions about this project or anything adjacent, please chuck them down in the comments, and I'll try to respond there or address in a future video. Otherwise, until next time, you guys stay safe and well and have a great time. Catch ya.